All right, thank you. Well, Ann and Dan, it's great to see both of you, and we'll get Frank in whenever he can make it. So first off, let's go back 35 weeks. Roughly 246 days, but who's counting? It's 3/11. And Ann, why don't you start? Tell us. I believe you were at a PGA Tour Partners Summit, and the end of the world started happening, right? Things started shutting down. Tell us a little bit about, where you were and some of the first things that you started doing with your team, with your partners, as you saw this wave of closings that was commencing.
Yeah, no, very memorable because I was down at the Players for the PGA Tour Partners Summit, and we were 2.5 weeks out from the Dell Technologies Match Play, which for us is one of our bigger sponsorships and really a signature event in how we use it with all of our stakeholders, whether that's customers, partners, suppliers, government affairs, others that we host throughout the week, and then obviously have the media presence and more. And so it was a very interesting Thursday. Ultimately, my boss and I found out about the same time as the world that the tournament wouldn't happen. We went to the no fans, and then I think Jay just called Michael, and it was done around 10 p.m. that night. So we had to, pretty immediately get into a triage mode. For us, there were all kinds of implications. We, pulled quite a bit of media that we just felt would be tone deaf, given the situation. We did, run the replay of the tournament and very quickly had to get rights to old spots so that we could at least be on air, even if it is background noise. And then working with our partners to understand the implications. Obviously, that one was very imminent, but, really started the ongoing discussions that all of us, I think, have been having on, make holes.
No, that's great. And Dan, tell us, a little bit, where were you on 3/11, and what were some of the things that you were thinking of? I mean, clearly MetLife Stadium, I guess you probably had some summer concerts and major events, but take us through, what your first actions were.
Yeah, I was home in New Jersey when the world stopped, and I think I was watching an NBA basketball game when the announcement came through that the league was going to shut things down right there in the beginning of a quarter. And our team, we quickly sat down to think about, what does this affect and how is this going to be affected immediately within our partnerships. The PGA Tour, similar to Ann, was kind of where we were in the heart of planning. We had spent about 6 months leading up to what was going to be an activation that was planned to launch on April 18th, I believe. We had a whole new campaign built, TV commercials, digital ads. We'd spent 6 or 8 months kind of building towards April 18th. And then over that 30-day period, I think similarly to what Ann just referred to, is the campaign we had built was centered around small business. And while it was certainly the right thing to be doing, the messaging was kind of tone deaf to the current situation. Our team took that opportunity to kind of lean in to the challenge and lean into the moment. We spent the subsequent next 45 days getting things ramped up to stick with small business, but to pivot the assets that we have with the PGA Tour to a completely different purpose. We wound up sponsoring the remaining tour events, the 20 remaining tour events from when they started back in June. And we sponsored every one of the events for the remainder of the year, making certain that MetLife dollars were going to go to the small businesses that make those tour events happen, to make sure bills were going to get paid to the caterers, get paid the construction companies, to the vendors, the sign companies. Anybody who was supporting a PGA Tour event for the remainder of the season was going to get money from MetLife that was unexpected, and that money was going to go towards the tournament and ultimately to those supporting small partners. So we stuck with the message that MetLife wanted to convey around our thing of small business and the workforce around small business, but we did it in a completely different manner, and we pivoted in 45 days to go from one campaign to the next. So it was a challenge, but the team and the agency partners rose to the challenge, and I think it was exceptional the way that the PGA Tour worked with us to really amend on, and turn on a dime in a way that was really going to be powerful for our brand and powerful for their business in a way to help tell that small business story and affect change in a really positive manner.
And Dan, you and Ann both have obviously investments, whether it's the old EMC partnerships that have become part of Dell Technologies, and certainly MetLife, in various venues and buildings. Can you guys maybe touch on how do you see, as we go into 2021, how are you going to leverage those properties with your B2B entertainment and hosting in a world where we're not sure we're going to go back to, the pre-311, Super Bowl in Miami, or the 2019 Q3, Q4 levels of attendance?
Great. I'll start. I think I go back to March, and we all thought we were going home for 2 weeks. So this certainly has been 2020, everyone talks about being 20 years, has felt that way. I'd say we're still optimistic. We're not going to be brazen about going back to live events, but certainly in our high-end enterprise business, we also feel there isn't a substitute for those in-person engagements. And I think that's true in enterprise selling and education and in so many other ways. On a positive, we've learned how to do virtual, and we've learned how to reach audiences that we might not have otherwise. And so I think we are expecting a gradual return, and on a positive note, taking advantage of what we've learned, so that you may only be able to take a few people to a high touch experience, but can also leverage it to larger audiences. And we'll see that those hybrid activations continue.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. I think we were a little bit slower to ramp up. I think similarly to Ann's point, I don't know that we thought it was going to last as long as it has. But it has, and we pivoted similarly to a number of virtual experiences for similar enterprise clients. In fact, we hosted a Masters event last night. I don't want to call it historic, but there were several people who did. Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player, and Tom Watson talking to several hundred MetLife clients the night before the Masters was a special experience for everybody who attended. Some great stories, and it's things we're going to try to keep doing. We pride ourselves at MetLife on making our experiences and our client hospitality and hosting opportunities really high touch. Not just it's got to be a full experience, and last night was similar in that regard. So I think of that. I think golf presents a unique opportunity, obviously. Golf was one of the first sports from a participant perspective to come back online. Our teams utilized and leveraged partnerships from the PGA to the PGA Tour to others to get in front of clients where they could in socially distant, appropriate manners. And I think we're going to try to look to do more of those kind of things. It may be outside of golf. I think we're going to do more of golf, obviously, in 2021. Look for other ways to do that. Those kind of experiences are out there. I think there's some evolving platforms that are being built of the pandemic, and we'll try to tap into some of the things that are out there in different ways to keep our client engagement programs going and keep those relationships strong.
Yeah, you guys both, obviously golf, certainly from a spacing perspective, it's the most, socially distanced friendly sport. Maybe some could say NASCAR around a big track. There's a lot of room to spread people out. As you look forward in 21, do you see yourselves maybe leaning on golf more than football or some of the other properties, or do you have a perspective there in terms of your investments in your portfolio moving forward?
Yeah, so for us, we've always loved golf for the C-suite audience, which it does really well. And I'd say the other factor also has been pace of play, if I will, in that you can talk to a customer about a deal opportunity, about their family, really to know them. And so it's always been great in our B2B settings. We've obviously loved that, when it was one of the few things people could do, it did enjoy a resurgence in terms of people playing the game, people following the game. So I think for us, it will remain strong, but also I'd say we're very much talking and thinking about the next generation of the C-suite. And some of that is in golf. We have a partnership with Topgolf, and they had a business that was furloughed for 12 weeks and incredibly impacted, but where they very successfully kind of doubled down on digital and the app so that you can check into the bay from your car, all the scoring, ordering food, everything right on your phone. And, great kind of technology story of how Dell Technologies is powering that, and an awesome way to get those next gen audiences, and whether it's IT and business decision makers or the C-suite interested in the game. So I think we'll continue to see that also evolution in terms of different platforms around sport.
Yeah, and listen, I work for a financial services insurance company. It's hard to argue that MetLife won't continue to participate in any number of ways in the sport of golf, certainly on a participatory level. From a brand perspective, from a client engagement perspective, that will happen. We've had a number of conversations in ways to try to amp up the participatory side of that. But I'd also say we're trying to explore other things, because it's not all golf, right? There are plenty of interests in the world. Our broker and B2B clients, people have different interests, whether that's physical fitness and activities that are about getting in shape, or lifestyle and nonprofit areas. I mean, there are so many different places to play that we're going to continue to explore, and like I said earlier, see if there are other emerging platforms and ways to engage in a socially distanced manner that are appropriate, because it sounds like MetLife is not only are we a financial services and an insurance company, but we're a risk management company. So risk mitigation is part and parcel to the DNA of a MetLife employee. So we're not going to be going back to the big events. The 4-person outing is certainly appropriate. The bigger, larger events are definitely going to be slower to come. So we're going to look for other opportunities and ways that people can get together, do it effectively, and do it in a creative manner. Again, high touch, so that people can really, spend the quality time and get a chance to talk about the business and build relationships in the right way. So while we look forward to going back to MetLife Stadium for concerts, for football games and the like, we're going to have to be creative for the next, it looks like, 6 and 12 months to do the right things by our sales teams ultimately and their clients.
Dan, you had mentioned, like, looking back, and I know you kind of do this, I guess you're in the enrollment period right now for new customers and everything. Do you have a perspective in terms of this year? We're midway through November, is it the end of the year? I mean, do you think you'll be able to look back at the past 6.5 months and quantifiably connect some of the, the things that we're able to get executed to sales, I guess, and how's your business going right now?
Yeah, business is decent. I think MetLife, 152 years old. We weathered a number of storms over the years. Something that the company prides itself on is being there through these challenging moments and helping customers, clients navigate those twists and turns and those challenges. So the company's doing very, very well. All things relative. Not a banner year, but certainly I think everybody internally is feeling good about the effort, the energy of what everybody at MetLife, the 49,000 employees, have done together globally. The ship headed in the right direction. To your point on the impact of the business, in hindsight, I think the company, we will look at the business, we will look at open enrollment. For those of you listening, if you're not paying attention right now during an open enrollment period at your organization, it's critical. It's not all about healthcare. Healthcare is extremely important, but there's a suite of voluntary and other benefits that you can choose at work that are really there for your benefit. That's what they're there for, and you should take advantage. I just increased some coverages on some things that I learned about in critical illness, and I think that's part and parcel to this pandemic, is thinking more about your holistic financial well-being as well as your own personal well-being. And the company will have ways to look at what the outcomes of this open enrollment period are, to see trends at the small business level, the regional business level, and the national accounts level, and probably examine the Dell Corporation to see how employees at Dell or at JP Morgan, if Frank ever gets here, we'll find out from Frank.
I'm here.
A little bit more, but I think
I think he's on. He's on audio. So
he's finally coming. Oh, that's him down there. Got it. So we'll finally hear from Frank. But whether it's JP Morgan or Dell, yeah, I think we're going to look at all those companies and look for ways to, to find out what insights we can garner and improve upon it, whether through the partnership portfolio or, directly in the business.
And Frank, before we'll pivot to you and get your input on several things. And one thing I thought was great, for those of us that are all glass half full, one man's junk is another man's treasure. One man's blizzard is another man's ski trip. So you brought up, when the shutdown happened. I think one of your big corporate clients, Amex, made a big purchase. So can you talk a little bit about that or some of the positive business things that have happened, I guess, in the past 6 months?
Absolutely. Yeah. So for, Dell Technologies, obviously technology had been, or I'd say is continuing to be one of the winners in all this as digital transformation agendas are accelerated and, laptops in particular really have become the lifeline. So Amex, many of our large customers needed 20, 30,000 laptops stat and flipped their workforce from central office locations into their homes really, over a weekend or over a week. And that was really incredible to see, and to see the Dell Technologies teams who, internally we had always had very flexible work arrangements and probably was 20, 30% of our 167,000 team members. But even for us to be able to get to our homes remotely and then support our customers was actually really impressive and cool to see. And it was, it's been interesting because, we deliberately are Dell Technologies, and that was the name of the company that was formed 4 years ago when Dell purchased EMC and VMware, and really had been a PC company and moving into the enterprise space and into many new areas. From a brand and sponsorship perspective, that has been our focus in making Dell Technologies understood as more than just a PC. And then this year, obviously, the PC became more essential than ever. And so how we make sure we balance that of, we do have, a incredible breadth in our portfolio, but also some of these technologies that have been really a lifeline for so many.
Well, Frank, we're glad you're on. Frank Nakano, the managing director of sports and entertainment marketing at JP Morgan Chase. So Frank, I guess the first question that we want to give us a 35-week day 246 rewind to 3/11. You're sitting there with a beautiful new Chase arena, basketball arena. You're getting ready for baseball games and opening day at Chase Field and with the Diamondbacks. And take us back to where were you and what were some of the first things that you did as 3/11 occurred and we started seeing this wave of cancellations, postponements, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, for sure. So apologies for being late, technical difficulties. So, and then Dan, apologies for ruining the flow, and John. It seems like a lifetime ago, but ironically was actually in the Bay Area, making my way back to New York. And I think it's like the phases of grief. I think in the early phase in March and April, I think we were just all reacting to it, right? It seemed like there's never seen anything like it. We were kind of rallying together, and I'd say in a lot of ways it brought out the best in a lot of us and the partners. And we worked on the West Coast with our partners to answer the immediate needs of like what does a lockdown mean for kids whose school is actually the one place they get meals. And we're fortunate largely that we have technology, we can work from home, but a lot of people don't. So we pivoted quickly with the Warriors and our partner Stephen Curry to provide technology and meals to kids in need, and did the same here with the crew at MSG. And we worked through sort of our own version of PPP before that was really a thing. But we bought close to 1,800 meals from, I think it was 60 plus of our client restaurants, Chase small businesses, and we fed 119 organizations, frontline workers. So again, had nothing to do with sponsorship, but we were just kind of reacting to the moment. So long-winded answer to your question. I think from there, obviously we've pivoted. I heard Dan talk about, how do you're creating virtual events, trying, again, we have no other choice, but how do you stay connected to customers through this period? So we've continued to try to do that best we can, and you can't replace the in-person experience, but we're certainly looking at different ways to do that.
And Frank, touch on, because I loved that story, if you want to expand upon it a little bit, but just like you're right, like the PPP. I mean, you guys didn't shut down and stop. You pivoted in a way where you could keep transactions going. So with your customers, and those small restaurants or delis that potentially would have been closed down and going out of business. Can you explain that a little more to everybody? Because I thought that was one of the necessity is the mother of invention. I thought that was an ingenious way to continue to service your customers and clients, and like I said, keep the commerce flowing.
Yeah, for sure. So at that point, sort of where we were in this cycle, it was less about commerce, but just more about like sort of answering the community in New York, right? Because this is our home market. Our credit to our partners at MSG. I think Chris is online. I know he's listening because he was giving me grief as to where I was not showing up. But again, we pivoted and said, like, what is the immediate need out there? And then obviously the support for the restaurants and small businesses was crucial, but that was happening at a bigger scale, right, through the PPP loans. But we pivoted our sort of sponsorship dollars with them to say, like, what's our version of helping the community? Again, doesn't have anything to do with sponsorship. It necessarily just has everything to do with being sort of a citizen in the community. And sure, we then, promoted it so we get some recognition out of it. But it was meaningful because it kept the lights on. I think, John, when we were talking, it was a 10-week program that these restaurants knew that they had revenue coming in from us. And it was meaningful. It was really touching to hear the stories of what it meant. And I don't know if for anyone that was, I'm sure in whatever market you're in, but you remember back into the end of March, early April, what it was like. And, it was scary. And the frontline workers who were out there and had to be out there felt like this was a way to support them and put some dollars to good use.
It's interesting because Frank, both you and Dan certainly have been on, the opposite side. You've been the buyer, the client, the sponsor. You've also been the agency and even the property. And Ann certainly has got a great background, in the Bain consulting world. And so I guess as as these conversations, I don't want to say, hey, who is better to deal with, MSG versus, pick a property. But do you guys want to, and I'll throw it out to the whole group, do you have some examples or anecdotes of how, a partner really worked well with you in terms of realizing you're not going to be able to take advantage of this asset, and let's pivot and change into these assets. And, again, with the end goal that, you guys, there's some brand awareness, but it's really about driving your business. You guys need to drive revenue for your respective organizations. Does anybody, again, I'm not trying to pitch you Chase versus MSG or MetLife. Those guys were tough for those guys. But any thoughts on examples?
I'll first say that I've only been a client in the sponsorships world, and that's definitely the best place to be. So for anyone who's considering the alternatives, and I kind of echo what you heard it from the New Balance team on the partners who have been creative. That's been amazing. And understanding that the way and the sources of value that typically were delivered weren't possible, but here's what we can do. those are the conversations that were incredibly productive, not we're giving you X, even though, in a normal year it's Y. And McLaren for us was a great example of that, where, in a normal year, there's 22 Grand Prix and we're around the kit and on the car, but we're also, bringing them on stage at Dell Technologies World and in our flagship events really across the globe, that we did everything from participated. They actually flipped their automotive production facilities into producing ventilators and the technology that was part of that. We incorporated them into virtual events, many of their executives. And then we also launched a really cool STEM series called McLaren Substitute Teacher, where their drivers, their engineers, also engineers from the CTO office at Dell gave, short, snappy 2 to 3 minute STEM lessons geared towards the kind of middle school population, and was just a great lifeline to parents that are trying to be educators and cafeteria workers and work from home and everything else. And so, that was a kind of an awesome initiative that, came together pretty quickly and did really, really well in market, and where we felt, very, I think, full in terms of value that was delivered, even though it was very different.
I'll build on that to an extent. I think that the big theme for me is going to be flexibility. It's flexibility this year because this year required flexibility, but I think it's flexibility in the future. I think we all write contracts that are, long term. Some 3, some 5, some 25, and things in the MetLife business, as I'm sure they do at JP Morgan, as I'm sure they do at Dell, change every single year. And having that level of flexibility on both sides of the table to adapt to a new objective, to a new business concern. MetLife sold this in 2016, halfway or 5 years into our relationship with MetLife Stadium. Things have to shift. We became more of a B2B company. We tend to grow in different directions internationally. Things are going to shift. We have to be flexible. And I think that's part and parcel to this year was flexibility, and most, if not all, partners were flexible to a certain extent, and the more flexibility the better. It gave us the ability to go back internally and share with the gatekeepers or stakeholders that we have. I'm an internal consultant. I have to work with our sales teams and our GMs to do what they need, and bringing them ideas and bringing them flexibility and things that will support their business this year was paramount. Will be going forward. So, to anybody listening, I think that's part and parcel to think about. The philosophy going into a relationship is you're going to make some decisions because you have to for the contract, but how do you build it and talk about it in a way that leads to flexible conversations in the future? Because things are going to inevitably change as they have this year. Hopefully not like this year, but they will change in the future, and you have to have that kind of a relationship and dialogue to make sure you can react as the business and or as the challenges around from the world are affecting us on an ongoing basis.
And that's a great point, Dan. This isn't over yet, and we don't know what the rest of 20 and 21 brings. So I think it's going to make us all better marketers, right? Because we have to think through differently. I think looking at it glass half full, right? We've had great conversations with every partner, and we'll kind of reset how we think about the future. And Dan, to your point, things change. These deals are meant to be big and flexible, and this is probably the ultimate test of that.
I've got a couple of questions here for all three of you, and so I'll throw this out. I guess as you look forward in 21 and beyond over the next 5 years, is there a particular property or a particular sport that you see as either pandemic proof, or I should say the most valuable potentially for you, or in terms of the business moving forward, right? Has this created some kind of change to say, oh, you know what, we should be doing made for TV Tiger versus Phil events or whatever, right? Can you talk about Ann and Dan and Frank as you guys look at your portfolios from 21 to 25? Is there a particular property or properties that you think is a good investment? And then B, are there some things that maybe you've learned or seen in the past 6+ months of this pandemic that have made you reassess or readjust your thoughts?
Well, one I jump in with that it just has so much excitement because the growth is incredible is esports. And while we are all Dell Technologies in sponsorship and our big brand campaigns and really use other sub brands at a product level, whether it's Dell or XPS or Dell EMC, Alienware is the one exception that we do partnerships because it is so cool and it is the creme de la creme of PC gaming. The Alienware guys told me you age out at 23 because of your twitch reflexes, and apparently you can't Tom Brady your way out of that. So I don't know, I'm a little upset about that. I'm very much over that hump, but more and more we are talking about not only esports for Alienware and for a gaming audience, but more and more it's the next gen IT decision maker for sure, but business decision maker and eventually the C-suite. And so at what point does Dell Technologies key audiences and stakeholders fit there? And how do we draft off the halo of Alienware, which definitely is the coolest brand in our portfolio, and make it relevant to other audiences? So I think that's definitely been a fun space to watch.
That's great. That's
I
great.
mean, I'll build back on the last point that it's not about what property is out there that's the next hot something. It's back to the business, right? It's back to what is the need. Whether that's our domestic businesses or the ones that we have overseas. It's what kind of objectives are they trying to achieve, and what can we tap into for them? I mean, a big shift in MetLife is going to be focused on demand generation. How do we bring people into the marketing funnel, both at the B2B level and the B2C level in different markets, and finding ways to tap into different properties that match the consumer profile or segmentation that we're trying to reach. Certainly, it's always the inverse. It's always starting from the business and working outward. And if there's a property that matches that, that's terrific. I will say I'm excited that MetLife Stadium at this point is going to be hosting a number of games during the World Cup in 2026 when the North American bid takes effect. So looking at a road to hopefully what will be the finals at MetLife Stadium, and the global soccer footprint is something that I'm constantly kind of evaluating to see where there might be some building blocks to get us to again hopefully a game at the building that's going to be seen by 1 billion people or more. That's a constant, right? The global football industry and landscape is vast per the conversation with New Balance previously, but always trying to keep an eye on what's going what leagues are hot and what teams are hot, and where there might be good points of connection.
That's great. And Frank, what are your thoughts looking in the next 5 years or so?
Yeah, so I kind of parallel what Dan's saying. Like we leverage all of our partnerships really because they drive business at the end of the day, whether it's with consumers, or below the line. But in some ways, it's oddly strengthened our belief in the partners we have, right? Because I think the power of the live experience between sports, entertainment, anything that happens at these moments when you're experiencing it live, we all remember, and I cite this all the time, you remember your first concert, you remember where you were when your team won a big game, you remember who you were with when you saw a certain show. So getting back to that, I think is exciting. It'll be different in the next year, though, getting to that. So we're trying to sort out and work through what that fan experience looks like it's always been about safety of the fan, but it's now safety takes on so many different levels. So how are we planning for the future of the experience that, we've already been ahead on contactless payments, but how do we reinforce that even more so? More value, right, of being away from, oddly being away from people while you're being with people at the same experience. And then, in the interim, what what works to stay engaged with customers. So the things that Ann talked about and the pivots that McLaren and she and her team are able to leverage. I think, we look at all those as ways we can do it in the short term. But again, I think, there's no replacing sort of the live engagement. And that's why all these discussions are so hard with partners, because I think we all realize that venues without fans is not sort of the same equivalent of what we signed up for, and everyone acknowledges that, and we're just trying to work through fair and like how we get through this together and come out of the other side smarter and better.
I can't resist, but because Frank and Dan are New Yorkers, I have to say, when you're in Boston, it's hard to remember because we just win.
Well, we will check in with you at the end of the show.
Hey, and easy, there was a local team down here in North Texas that won 3 Super Bowls in 5 years, and then David can attest. The lug nuts came off for a couple decades, so But I'm sure
I'm convinced we got a winning team now. Once we get through the injury bug, I've never seen a team with so many starting players all down at the same time. It's ridiculous. But guys, this was so great. Frank, I'm glad that we got you on audio. Dan, and this is wonderful. And I'll be in touch. We should talk about the Alienware stuff. I think there's a lot of meat there to talk about. But this is John. Fantastic job moderating. This is really wonderful. Thank you all.
Well, thank you guys, and stay safe and healthy. And if you make it down to North Texas, give me a call.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, we're going to continue with our show. We have another fantastic speaker, Eric Dickens, who's the CEO and co-founder of Cadenwood. Eric's background